Trust is a really difficult thing to understand, and my trust rested with my dad, who was managing that side of my life, only to find out 8 years later that the trust I thought I had was not being had. So I unfortunately lost quite a bit of money because the one person I thought I could trust mismanaged my funds and used it for his own. At that sort of end part of apartheid, as a person of color in South Africa, I was given incredible opportunities. I went to the best schools. Kazoli Mapimpi, for 5 years of his life, had to walk 10 kilometers to school in the morning, 2 hours, 10 kilometers back home in the evening, and he became the first Springbok rugby player to score a try in a World Cup final. The partner you choose to spend your life with is probably one of the most important career decisions you make. That person, 9 times out of 10, gives up their dream so that you can chase yours. That person is the first person you see or have to spend time with when it's going phenomenally well, and the person that has to eat up all your crap when it's going phenomenally bad. If England had won in 2019, they would have come back, there would have been a ticket tape parade, and it would have been done. See Khaleesi and the team take that trophy back to South Africa, and all of a sudden, kids in townships in South Africa see not hope anymore, they see potential reality. Making my announcement in 2018 of retiring, as I opened the door, I burst out crying, and I sobbed. And then, in that moment of total isolation, being at a low, I hear Timothy, 3 years old, having this phenomenal belly laugh downstairs. In this moment of uncontrollable solace for myself, I was like, there's so much more to life than what rugby had given me.
Welcome, Harry.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
I didn't know that you were here today.
I know, nice surprise. Dude, this will forever be the funniest day ever entering the office. Where it's like, how did you come in? Well, Brian opened the door. I literally was like, I swear I know you, Brian.
I did think I was opening the door for a delivery man of sorts.
It's funny you say that because a lot of people comment on the look and they go,
yeah, you weren't dressed up.
Dude, I just came from a walk in the park. I was doing my other job.
Okay, yeah, I was actually wondering, should I even open the door for you? You don't look good enough.
You look like an intruder.
Something like that.
In London, intruders all wear short shorts,
100%.
and have the wet hair look.
Wet hair and a bomber jacket. I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, but listen, Brian, it is great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I thought I'd bring a little bit of vitamin D this time of year, but obviously, yeah, it just didn't work. And getting on a bike, even though it was only an 8-minute cycle, I am very drenched. I really appreciate you fitting me into a very busy schedule 3 days ago, for yourself, not for me, because I'm actually a man of leisure working remotely in my dodgy Airbnb at Paddington, waking up at 4:45 in the morning because we're 2 hours behind South Africa, saying hello to the family. So I've actually been very chilled. So you've got me at a time where remote working is easily manageable when you do have your own company. So I had my 6:20 this morning stand up for Pay Me Now, followed by a few other things.
Let's start on that side of it, because it's actually something that I guess a lot of people won't know you as well for, but a huge number of the athletes that listen to this show, the one thing they want to understand more than anything else is when we have people on here who have achieved the absolute utmost in sport and have then gone on to transition, like how they actually did it.
Yeah, I think you need to take a step back, because where I am now is very much because of my rugby career. And I think when you want to be successful in life, and I've got this opinion that sports gives you sort of 5 key principles that become non-negotiables in attaining success no matter what sphere of life you're in. I think the first one is discipline. And every athlete, rugby, soccer, football, athletics, tennis, golf, like discipline is a one non-negotiable that if you correlate that immediately to those that in business, in arts, in culture, in sport, discipline is sort of the underlying foundation of success. Whether they determined to prove themselves right, determined to prove a theory right, determined to build a startup, so that discipline to do that is key. Sacrifice, I think, is a non-negotiable, and I think people just see sacrifice as you having to maybe not put yourselves in positions when you're a youngster where your mates are going out and drinking at university, which I also did at times, but you did stuff that, you had to then, if you went out and drinking at university, but you had a 6 o'clock get up time to go to fitness. If you had to then know that you were sacrificing something. So you're either sacrificing sleep, sacrificing your body physically, because you were going to either coach when you are doing your fitness the next morning. So sacrifice is a key non-negotiable, because you can't have success if there's no sacrifice. Hard work or work ethic becomes a non-negotiable if you want to achieve success. And then the 2 key points for me are resilience and perseverance. So those sort of 5 subset skill sets that athletes fundamentally associate with the journey that they have as professional athletes becomes incredibly important. And for me, if I look at my rugby career, Pay Me Now, my fintech company, of which I'm the chief client officer, we're performing 1 million transactions a month now on the platform. We've got a user base of just over 750,000, having grown it in 6 years to this point. Got profitability in 18 months, for a certain reason that I'll chat about a bit later. But it wasn't me. My university roommate approached me with this concept in 2019. I'd been a year out of rugby, sort of dabbling with broadcasting, ambassadorial work with the likes of an HSBC, a MasterCard, Land Rover. And he's like, well, I've got this cool concept. He'd been in the financial services industry for the better part of 18 years after leaving varsity. I was playing rugby. And he said he can find this co-founding team that he believes can, from a ability to execute, put something in the market that wasn't there. So I didn't choose it. It chose me. And Gary Player's got this whole thing, the harder you work, the luckier you get. I think what sometimes people don't understand is you don't always decide your own luck. It's very much like I get asked, who's the best coach I played under? What is best? Is it winning a World Cup, being the first coach to win Super Rugby, the first coach that selected me? I say, well, the best coach is the one that selected me because I put myself in a position to be selected, but I didn't select myself. And if I look at the journey that the transition period has given me, it's that you discipline. But I think where a lot of athletes potentially struggle is they don't know how to apply the skill set that professional sports taught them and almost unlearn some of it to learn a new thing. So yes, you know how to be disciplined. Yes, you know how to sacrifice work and all these things. And one of the greatest correlations or sort of analogies that I can give someone is when the Springboks were winning the World Cup in 2019, I was fortunate enough to be there with ITV in Japan. In my opinion, probably the most phenomenal opportunity South Africa had as a nation, despite 95, despite 2007, to speak to South Africa. See Khaleesi standing up there, the first black African, not only to captain the country to then win it, Makazole Mapimpi. But Dion, my university roommate, who was then my CEO, phoned me and was like, listen, we've developed our MVP. And I was like, sitting in Japan, I was like, Dion, Harry, Willem, Brian. I was like, dude, am I not the MVP of the business? Like, you approached me because, that was going to be my ability to add. He's like, what the are you talking about? Like, most valuable player, right? Like MVP. He's like, dude, we're talking about tech, minimum viable product. You remember that from second year informatics? I'm like, oh. And that's sort of the correlation and analogy, right? I was like MVP, minimum most valuable player. That's what I am. And Harry Potgieter and Willem van Zyl, our CDO and our CTO, had built our MVP in the matter of a month that had been deployed in that month where the Springboks won the World Cup. And I was sitting in Japan thinking I'm like the important cog in the wheel. I wasn't the minimum viable product. So I do believe you work hard and you've got that skill set and you almost need to apply it appropriately in life, because it doesn't help you have that skill set, but you don't know how to read a budget statement. You don't know how to read or do a PowerPoint presentation. All of a sudden I'm in the sales biz dev team. If I wasn't able to do a PowerPoint presentation and have to rely on someone else, we were only 4 guys. The workload that I was putting on and the strain that I was putting on the other founders within the business was not going to be viable enough for the success. So it's that skill set that then correlates. And I think for me, if I look at this journey over the last 6 years, it's been taking that you've learned as a professional rugby player, professional athlete, and applying it appropriately in the business context, which is tough because you go from earning the salary of a CEO at 21 years old to a very steep cliff when you retire, and the real world's pretty brutal, and no one gives you free clothes anymore. No one gives you, because there's a new generation coming through, and your process of being on the sausage machine factory, you're actually being in the box and you've been deported and the next sausage is being processed at the back. So you are no longer that person, and you almost need to not reinvent yourself, but you need to take that skill set, which we've all learned and become accustomed to, but apply it differently in business.
I have so many things I want to ask you on the back of that. Like, when I came in, I'm also like such a fan of yours. And I'm also such a fan because of the deep respect for especially the discipline and the sacrifice element. Like, if we go to discipline, is there an example that you remember where your intense discipline led you to excellence? Like, was it the fact that you got in the gym earlier, that you worked hard? What is an example that comes to mind when you think of discipline?
So we chatted off air around, I classify myself as a geriatric millennial. So that sort of time period between let's call it 78 and 1990, where there was no technology. You didn't get born into technology, but you had to learn technology. So there was this correlation. My first ever game of rugby, and maybe just context about my journey, I watched 1995, 24th of June at Ellis Park. I was a 12-year-old boy sitting in that stadium, had never played the game before. At 12 years old, I got to witness history. I got to witness one of the most iconic moments in sport. But I got to hear Francois Pienaar on receiving the William Webb Ellis Cup from Nelson Mandela, who was wearing a number 6 Springbok jersey, which for 80% of South Africa was a sign of oppression back in 95. When Francois received that trophy, he said it wasn't for the 60,000 in the stadium, it was for the 48 million South Africans. Like, in a very sensitive time early on in our democracy. We just had our first democratic elections in 94, but I was a 12-year-old boy who got exposed to a lot. So for me, that moment was, I got to encapsulate that moment. I wasn't thinking about the apartheid era. I wasn't thinking about where, I was like, wow, this group of men have done something phenomenal. I want to do what they did. Went to King Edward VII School the following year. My first ever game of rugby as a 12-year-old was for the under-14 G side. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, just for your part, Harry. It wasn't quite the fairy tale start that I was hoping for, right? But I'd now become a part. So I got born into this era where rugby was still very amateur. It only became professional as a sport in 1996. So the game was still very amateur. And I never went to gym until I was 18 years old. So I never had this correlation of, like, I loved the game. And obviously my journey meant that I only played for the under 14 G once because I was good enough to, like, just jump up the levels quite quickly. But there were highs and lows. And one of the biggest turning points was I never played SA schools or national representative rugby for school under 19s. And the first opportunity I got was when a coach moved me from scrum half to centre. And I was like, am I not a good enough scrum half to make it internationally? He goes, no, well, I see something in you that I believe you could be better in that position, right? So that's why, like, who do we measure best as? Moved to centre, had an absolutely storming under 20 year, captain my provincial team. And then Jake White, who had done really well successfully with the S under 21s a year prior, having won the World Cup in South Africa, had pulled a squad together. I was 20 years old, and he said, listen, if you want to become a Springbok rugby player, you need to put on at least 10 kilograms. You need to become more muscular. You need to become fitter, stronger, quicker. And I was like, but I'm like the best player in my age group. Because, yeah, but that's not good enough. And there was sort of a time period at the end of 2003 where the likes of a nutritionist or a dietitian, a strength and conditioning coach, that I'd never really done gym. I had to put on 8 to 10 kilos. I had to drop body weight in terms of fat percentage. I had to get a much higher or lower body fat percentage to make sure that my musculoskeletal framework was a lot better. I had to get quicker, and I was already quick. So there's that sort of 2-3 month time period where the discipline, and I'll never forget, I used to get home and my mom and dad would have this massive plate of rice in front of me. It was so bland, so dire. I was like, do I not even get gravy? Like, no, you don't get gravy. And I have to eat all of it. I'm like, you get like 4 spoons in and you're like, oh my word, I'm not making any dent on this mountain of rice. And then my parents would sit there and go, well, you're going to need to finish that. Jake White said you need to put on 8 kilos. And like an hour later, you're like still trying to get the rice. I'm like, do I not get any gravy? So that time period in my early development years as a professional rugby player became critically key in laying the foundation for my physical development for the next 15 years. And it was discipline. It was, you got to eat correctly. You've got to train in this way. You've got to listen to the experts. You can't just go on your own tangent. You're a 20-year-old. You can't go out with your mates because your fitness level requires you to be better and do things sacrificially that maybe other 20-year-olds aren't doing in that particular moment in their life. So that time period played an incredibly fundamentally key moment in my career for me. Firstly, to create longevity, because my body formed and physically grew in a way in which I was really injured throughout the course of my career, but it was because of that appropriateness from a physical point of view to put the right measures in place with the right expertise. I think that's something. I wasn't an expert in diet. I wasn't an expert in S&C. So I needed the right framework of experts or expertise to help me build to a point of discipline.
What was raw talent and what was learned? Was speed always the thing that you
Speed
would play
was
off?
always a thing. But again, when you haven't, as a 17-year-old, when you've never been in the gym and you don't know what a snatch is, or you don't know how to improve your fast twitch muscle fibers, I never knew I could get quicker when I was back at school. So I'll never forget the first time I ever went to gym. I was 17 years old. I was in my final year of school. I went with one of my mates, and I'm not sure you've ever done 21s. So 21s is when you take a weight and you go like 7, 7, and then 7
Oh,
forwards,
yeah, I
right?
do this often.
2 21s.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like it. Sorry. Gloves.
It's fine.
And I'll never forget. So I'd gone to gym for the first time ever. I think I had to pay like 40 Rand to get into the gym. And my mate who'd been going to the gym for a while, he made me do these things. So this is the first time I'd ever done like any muscular work. And I was like, oh, okay, this is easy. And he pushed me really hard. And there was a real quick failure. I was like, geez, okay, this is pretty tough. I woke up the next morning. I couldn't move my arms. I was walking around like a freaking stick man. I literally, it was swollen. Like there was no differentiation between my bicep and my forearm. And I'd like, what is going on here? Like, I can't bend my arms. Like, oh, well, how it actually works is when you train your muscles very hard, your muscles tear, and in tearing, they rebuild. And when they rebuild, they become bigger, stronger. I was like, but I need to write. So I was right, for that whole day at school, I had to write with a straight hand. And at 17 years old, that was the first time I'd ever been to a gym and trained with weights. And I'd never realized that. So speed was always a thing. Raw talent, I did have ball skills and a really decent ball sets. But when I played that first game under 14G, I couldn't kick a ball properly. I was scrum half. I was this high. When I wore shoulder pads, you couldn't see my neck, although you can't see my neck still. Thank you very much, Harry.
Revenge.
Thank you so much. I couldn't pass with my left hand. So there was a certain level of skill that I needed to learn that I didn't understand from rugby. So being quick helped, but I was also the smallest guy ever. So my dad always used to say this thing, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And then I'd look at him and I'd go, the harder they're going to fall on me. And I'm like, I'm 60 kilograms, they're like 90, so it's going to hurt me. But physically, I needed to learn certain attributes. So yes, having the raw talent. And there's the great saying that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard enough. And I think for me, it was really important really early on that I needed to understand that I had a little bit of talent, but I needed to really develop that talent into a point of professionalism. And it didn't just happen overnight. It took 5, 6, 7 years before I got to that place.
When you think of the other pillar that I think is so important is the resilience pillar, also in life as well as an entrepreneur. But when you think about the resilience pillar, what was the lowest moment, and what did you say to yourself then to pick yourself up?
So there's not just one lowest moment. I think in any success journey, there's quite a few. I think my first low was I was 16 years old. I'd been kept back a year because I'd been put in school a year early. So I'm matriculated. I finished school when I was 17, and normally in South Africa, you finish school when you're 18. So I'd had a pretty decent sort of development process from a rugby perspective at school. But in my second last year, where you go into the open age group category, the school asked me to stay back a year with a group behind me. So I was like, I don't understand. I want to play for the first team. They go, no, we actually need you playing for the under 16s. They're not a great group, so we need to help. And I'm like, but I've only got 2 years left of playing in age group level rugby with my mates in my grade. It's like, no, we really need you there. I'm like, so then I was like, okay, that's disappointing. I really thought I was good enough to try and make the first team, because that's what all the legends before me did. I was like, so I played on the 16s, it was in the A side and went really well. And in the last game of the season, I'd actually gone so well that I'd been pulled into the provincial team. Or the second last game of the season, I got pulled into the provincial team. They were playing 1 or 2 games. It was the first time I'd ever got paid to play rugby as a 16-year-old. I got a little envelope with 500 Rand, which in today's terms is probably like 20 quid. But as a 16-year-old, getting that amount of money, I felt like a billionaire, not even a millionaire. And then I went to go tell our under 16A coach. I was like, Coach, listen, you're not going to believe this. I've just made the Lions and like team. He goes, okay, cool. I'm like, so I can't unfortunately play this weekend, but I'll be back on Monday for training. He goes, oh no, don't worry, you're going to be in the under 16C team next week. I was like, sorry, what? He goes, no, you're choosing the province over your school. So, the last game of the season, you're going to be playing in the seaside. I was absolutely livid. I was swearing. I went home and I went to my dad and I was like, this is absolute BS. This is ridiculous. I don't understand. They're putting, the province head of the school, but it's a 16-year-old. You don't understand what the hell has this decision just been made. And my dad's, and I'm like, listen, I'm done. I'm not playing ever again for the school. This is absolute BS. They can take their kite and fly it. And my dad sat me down and he goes, nope, you're not going to do that. I'm like, but you don't understand. It's horrible. He's like, nope, you're not going to let anyone steal your joy. I'm like, but I'm going to play for the seaside for the last game of the season. It's like, I say, well, you know what? You are going to go play for the seaside. And when that game's done, we're going to quickly drive to the school and you're going to support your 8-team teammates in their last game of the season. I wanted to take a cup and throw it against my dad's head. I was like, dude, you're not hearing me. I absolutely hate this team, this coaching staff who have now embarrassed me in every way possible, dropped me for the last game of the season. He goes, no, you're going to suck it up because you're not going to let people steal your joy. And you're going to go support your teammates in their last game of the season, and you're going to do it well with a smile on your face. And I was broke. I was like, why?
What's the lesson there?
So the lesson there is that life isn't going to be a smooth journey. Life, and unfortunately, when people are involved, your ideology of how people should operate isn't reality. And I believe that I was the best player in the team. I was the only player that called up to provincial level. And I almost put myself on a platform. But my dad said, do not ever, ever let people steal your joy. Because when you get knocked down, no one's going to be putting you in a little cotton wool saying, oh, I'm so sorry. Life is hard. Life is really, really hard. And he goes, if you're going to allow something as trivial as this, where you know your own value, and you're going to allow someone else to determine your worth by their decisions, not yours, you're never, ever going to be able to become successful.
So when you look at yourself and then what you went on to achieve and how you were, successful then at a level that very few players actually reach, was that a moment that you could go back to if a piece of disappointment happened to you? You actually were able to apply that because managing ego versus success, even for the most humble athletes, can be hard.
Yeah,
right?
It can be very hard. And I think why I say that was very early on in my sort of development as a person, more so than as a rugby player. And what I learned that day is when you wake up in the morning, and it's something that I've sort of based a lot of my life on, not just from a sporting perspective. I truly believe when you wake up in the morning, the choice to be made of how you're going to approach life is yours to make. So no matter how tough it was the day before, no matter how low you were the day before, no matter how high the high was the day before, you get to choose. And if you allow the world to impact how you choose, the world's constantly going to choose for you. And you're never going to empower yourself physically, mentally to decide. And that lesson as a 16-year-old taught me that I'm not going to get things on a silver plate. And when it's going well, everyone might love me. But when it's going tough, myself and my immediate circles are going to be the only ones that I can rely on. But when I wake up in the morning, and if I'm going to allow the world to determine my joy and happiness, the world's going to be a really tough place for the rest of my life. And in your point, even at the lowest of lows, getting booed off a stadium by 43,000 South Africans back in 2010 when I was playing absolutely crap rugby was not easy because I was like, but why? But then I sat there and I think, well, I can let this define me. I can let this moment of absolute loneliness, abysmalness, define who I am, or I can lean on the people closest to me who are criticizing me positively to build me up, not to break me down. This specialists or experts in mental coaching, eye visual training, all these things to get better. So one of the fascinating things I learned at that point was you get to choose. You can choose positive or you can choose negative. And I believe in choosing positive, and I'll also be very accountable and say, I don't always get it right. But if you create a circumference or diameter of positivity, when people step into that, their lives get changed, their immediate energy changes. And I think for me, that's because I can wake up every day and I can be grumpy. Or I can wake up every day and have a smile in my face. I can open a door for someone that looks like a very dodgy delivery man in the UK with a smile on my face, having never met you before. And all of a sudden, you feel, and there's a quick chirp or correlation, but you automatically feel engaged. You feel, oh, wow, this is not a guy that's an absolute arsehole. You immediately feel uplifted. And I honestly feel that as human beings, we get to have that choice. And you need to empower yourself to make that choice, because if you don't make it, the world's going to keep you down in the dumps for a very long time.
Okay, on that, when we think about like the choices that you make and the success that you had, I remember watching you, and respectfully, I didn't care about the Springboks. I cared about Bryan Habana.
That's amazing.
Like, it was the Bryan Habana show for me, and I think for a lot of people. Did you ever let your ego get ahead of you?
100%. And I said earlier, I'll never forget my now wife, then girl that I tried very hard for 2 years to try to get at university. I was so hard friend zoned, so hard for 2 years. And eventually I was like, I've tried too hard here, right? And after like a year, like 2 years, she invited me to like her big gala event at her hostel. And in that week of the event happening on the Friday evening, I'd had this phenomenal run in 2004. And on that Thursday, I got announced as a 21-year-old, having never played Super Rugby, into the Springbok side for the home leg of the Tri-Nations. And I mean, Super Rugby was like the almost cornerstone, stepping stone to become a Springbok. And I hadn't even played Super Rugby, so I had a phenomenal Under-21 World Cup. And my rugby mates were like, they couldn't control themselves. Like, what, you're 21, you're going to become a you're going to be around those legends? We were playing the All Blacks that following week. I was in the group, so I actually didn't get selected. And we went to this gala event on the Friday evening, and I was like surrounded by all my rugby teammates. They were like, I was the talk of the town. Like, they couldn't stop. And Janine came up to me and she said, what the hell's going on here? I'm like, have you not heard the news? She's like, what news? She was like, I've just become a Springbok rugby player. And she looked at me and goes like, you? Really? A rugby player? Like for the Springboks? I'm like, yes. She's like, no. I'm like, oh, ego. And I mean, she's an absolute superstar and probably the best decision I've ever made in my life. But it also was a sort of a point of reference of, I'm maybe not as amazing as I think. Because like all my teammates that were playing age group level rugby with me, they were like besides themselves. They could not believe it. And here was someone who, for her, sport wasn't the be-all and end-all. She had a pretty tough upbringing where she had to constantly fend and fight for herself. She lost her dad when she was 12 years old. And she was like, okay, rugby's cool, but what? Like, but what? And it really was for me. I was like, ooh. I'd been so enthralled with this rugby environment, and rugby was just such a big thing in my life. And it was almost a point of saying, okay, well, if I'm going to go on this journey, how do I understand that rugby is a big part of my life, but that rugby should never be my life? Which is very difficult when you're in it to sort of differentiate, because we almost, as a team and as individuals, when you sort of go through the point, is like, if something were to happen today and you're a professional athlete, and that image, that person that you are as an athlete gets taken away, are you able to physically and emotionally handle not being that? And that's a tough question athletes struggle to ask themselves when you're in this little bubble of professional sports for such a long time. They still identify themselves as that in a world where they're not that. But it's that understanding of, you know, when Janine said, really? I was like, wow, ouch.
What's your, this is totally off topic for business and sport, but it is probably the single most important decision you make in life. And you've had this relationship when you were chosen, when you were nothing, to when you were the hero of a nation. What's your single biggest piece of advice on partner selection?
The partner you choose to spend your life with is probably one of the most important career decisions you make. because they keep you honest. And I was very fortunate. So myself and Janine had this where 2 years I was really a nobody. I tried really hard. And I think, firstly, when you become a professional sports person, it's always difficult to equate or understand, are you just now with this person because of who you are? And I think my fortune was that I sort of had known her for 2 years before I became Bryan Habana, the rugby player. So there was a level of friendship that had become a solid foundation. But the partner you choose, that person, 9 times out of 10, gives up their dreams so that you can chase yours. That person is the first person you see or have to spend time with when it's going phenomenally well, and the person that has to eat up all your crap when it's going phenomenally bad. So your mood swings, your depression when it doesn't go well in a rugby game or professional, like that person. And if that person can't handle that, that impacts your ability to do what you do. So the person you choose to spend your life with or be in a relationship with while you're doing professional sports is a critically key component for you to be successful. So the expectations, and I think something that we probably did wrong is because we were so young. I mean, I started earning the salary of a CEO at 21 years old, right?
Because how much were you paid at 21?
Pounds-wise, it was actually funny. So I became a Springbok rugby player in 2004. And when I say became a Springbok, I got included into the group earning, in today's currency exchange valuation, £5,000 a year. So that's when I became a Springbok, right? So I was 21 years old, just got back. My contract then went up when I eventually then did become a Springbok and went to the Bulls. So probably about £25,000 a year. But in South African rands, that was a lot of money, right? It was a lot of money in South African rands. And as a 21-year-old, I was living like a king. Like, honestly, I bought my own house. I was 21 years old. Like, my mates who just finished university, they weren't doing what I was doing. So I'd all of a sudden come into this money. And that's also a difficult thing with professional athletes. When you come into all this money at such a young age and you don't know how to read a budget, or you don't know how to forecast, you don't know how to do all these things, and then you have to trust either in people around you or trust in financial advisors. And my financial advisor at that point said to me, no, open on a retirement annuity. You're going to get a tax benefit. I'm like, okay, well, if he says it must be true, because I hadn't been taught about finances. Not knowing that when I opened not only one but two retirement annuities at the age of 21, that by that time that was costing me less than, call it £200 a month, if not less. Let's call it £100, between £100 and £150, not knowing that just a normal CPI escalation over a 15-year period, when I retired and there was zero income coming in, not only was I not going to be able to continue paying that monthly payment, but I wasn't going to be able to touch that money until I'm 55 or 56. So like for 20 years, the money I'd been saving for the last in a retirement annuity, I couldn't touch. But I wasn't advised properly about that, because I was like, oh, that's...
So what do you know now that you wish you had known then? For all the young athletes listening, what would you tell them?
Equip yourself with the skill set, sometimes as basic as it needs to be. Firstly, around finances. So you don't have to be a chartered accountant, a CFO, actuarial scientist. But if you don't know how money works, you're not going to know how to work with money. So if you don't know that a retirement annuity only pays out at 55, and that a normal CPI escalation over a 15-year period, you're not going to be paying that, because no salary in the world when you start is going to give you what rugby gave you when you finished. No salary in the world. Like, no job in the world that you can immediately step into, not having a CV of climbing the corporate ladder for 15 years, is going to give you what your last salary was as a rugby player. So if you don't know how money works, you're not going to know how to work with money. So if you can't read a budget, if you can't actually do a budget, if you can't read an Excel spreadsheet, if you're going to be in sales or marketing or whatever, and you don't know how to do a PowerPoint presentation, you're going to either then pay someone to do that, or you're going to have to rely on someone else to do that for you. and you're not going to then be able to. So if you're not able to handle the environment in which rugby and professional sports puts you in, it's going to handle you. And then when you're done, it's going to be pretty tough. You're going to have to rely on someone else. So if you don't know how money works, you're never going to know how to work with money.
So in the context of celebrity, where did being like that front-facing person in such a quick time of a Springbok put you? What's the power of the Springbok?
Well, the power of the Springbok. So I think there's various levels of being a Springbok rugby player. So when I made my debut against England at the home of rugby, England were the then world champions in 2004 on the 20th of November 2004, scoring a try with my first touch of the ball in international rugby against the world champions at the home of rugby. It was pretty spectacular. Could have been more spectacular had we not been thumped 32-16 that day on a very cold November day here in the United Kingdom, where the vitamin D is at an all-time low. But then getting thrust into the limelight, then there was the likes of John Smith, the Victor Matfield, the Skalkberger, Jean, like Percy Montgomery, heroes of mine, and all of a sudden you get thrust into the limelight. Then you're the cover boy for brands. I was like, so, and you also don't know, and again, social media wasn't a thing back then. Facebook had just barely been around for a year or two. So brand building was very much relationship nurturing. Yes, you had an agent, you had a few people in and around you, but also being able to then categorize your time and management thereof, because you still need to be an incredible rugby player to be in that limelight. And not everyone gets to be the first South African to be the Gillette face alongside Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, and Thierry Henry. And I was 24 years old. And there's another element that we can obviously chat about, and you talk about what do you need to learn to be able to understand what it's like to be a professional athlete. Trust is a massive element. That's not always easy, because when you're young, who are the people you trust? Is it your parents? Is it your family? Is it a lawyer? Trust is a really difficult thing to understand. And my trust rested with my dad, who was managing that side of my life for a very young age, only to find out 8 years later that the trust I thought I had was not being had. So I unfortunately lost quite a bit of money because the one person I thought I could trust mismanaged my funds and used it for his own over the course of 8 years. So
I'm so sorry. How did you find out?
I got married, funnily enough. Janine, she is phenomenal. I'll never forget, I invited her to that first game where I was involved in the Springbok team. And obviously it was me trying to be like a Romeo. I was like, oh, come on, you're getting to be with the wives and girlfriends at Ellis Park, the absolute home of SA Rugby. And she went in there and she felt so awkward because everyone was asking oh, who are you with? She's like, oh no, Brian invited me. Oh, so how long have you been together? No, we're not together. But why are you here? Oh, I don't know. He invited me. I thought sure case. Surely you become my girlfriend now. I invited you to a Springbok game. And one of the first things when we sort of started going on the journey together, she looked at me and she said, who manages, how do you manage your finances? I was like, sorry, who are you and why, what? She said, no, she just got a feeling I just need to be aware that she feels I need to manage my money better. No, my dad's managing, trust it. And she's like, are you sure that's the right thing? And she's like, I was like, yeah, it's my dad, 21, I don't know how to manage money. And then when we got married, there was sort of a journey of, I wanted a sort of quiet, intimate wedding. And my dad had, he sat me and Janine down, oh, you can't do this. You're the Will and Kate of South Africa. You have to have this public marriage. I'm like, no, we don't. And I'd obviously put a lot of trust in my dad, and I believed the best. And then we sort of went on this journey of now having this public wedding, which we had zero control over. So my dad was managing everything, and it just became an absolute shit show. Where on the Friday night, Janine was crying because her mother had been lambasted by my dad, and the event organizer of our wedding, I was in New Zealand, and she phoned me. She's like, listen, I'm not getting paid. I'm like, what do you mean you're not getting paid? Like, well, your dad's not paying us. And he like sort of phoned my dad, and we'd also had a bit of a hiccup. And I was like, but why are people? Oh no, sorry, sort it out. And then when we finally got married, so our wedding day was amazing, but there was a real behind the scenes sadness for the both of us. And we'd come back, and I'd actually signed to go down to the Stormers, so the Western Cape, Western Province from the Bulls, which was also horrible. It was going north-south, and we'd had to put down a deposit on a house. So I sort of went to my dad to listen, because my dad was managing all my commercial elements. I was still getting my rugby contract salary, and my dad was managing all the commercial sponsorships. And like, listen, I need to take a bit of chunk out of my nest egg, because we need to buy a house, because houses in Cape Town are a lot more expensive than houses in Johannesburg. It's like, okay, cool, no, it's coming. And like, the more I'd ask, like, the more the money wasn't coming. And at a point, the estate agent in Cape Town said, well, listen, if you don't pay the deposit now, you're going to lose the house. And it was our dream home. I was like, I can't lose this house. So I actually had to get bridging finance, because I wasn't getting any of my nest egg. I had to go get bridging finance from an institution. And then I approached my dad. I was like, listen, what's happening here? And he goes, no. So there was a time period of about 3 months where nothing was forthcoming. And then end of 2009, I was in talks with Adidas and Canterbury about an apparel sponsor, but I'd been with Adidas as a boot sponsor for my whole life, and Canterbury were really good to me. And on the 1st of January 2010, I sent out an email, because I now sort of started finding out, I think things were a bit dodgy and nothing had been forthcoming. I sent an email out to all my sponsors saying, listen, any negotiations or contractual talks that have been held with my dad up until the 31st of December is null and void. Any future contractual obligations needs to come directly to me or my lawyer. And the CEO of Canterbury International emailed me back immediately, like, Brian, but like, we've just signed you for 5 years. I'm like, sorry, what? No, like, we've paid a very big re-signing fee to sign you for the next 5 years. So I phoned my dad, I'm like, listen, where's this money? He goes, oh no, he didn't receive any money. But like, I had the contract in front of me. I was like, I had the contract, I had the deposit. So it was pretty tough.
And so, I'm sorry, your dad was just pocketing that money?
Yeah. So they were living off it, unfortunately. So he was living a life off it. So I then also believed, so then I sort of went into legal. So I thought we had signed a trust document for the Bryan Habana Trust, which I then found out that never ever existed. And for some weird reason, I actually signed another one with my legal lawyer in Pretoria at the Bulls. That was actually the only live trust that I had. So the actual Bryan Habana Trust, which I thought all my commercial money was getting paid into, was actually my dad's bank account.
And the money that you were getting from a contract was the money that you were able to live off. So that was the money that you.
And to be fair, I was living pretty well.
Yeah.
So as 2009, I was 26 years old. I was still living pretty well. But I was, and you also I couldn't share that with the world, because there was this sort of outward world-facing view that myself and my dad and the relationship we had was phenomenal, right? And then I moved on, and to my dad's credit, he did get me the biggest contract in South Africa in 2009, going down to Western Province. So that sort of helped. And again, we've not had a relationship in 15 years, because when I did approach him with the facts, he denied everything, but all the money was gone.
You didn't recoup that money?
No. So the Gillette money, which was not as much as what the publications say, I didn't actually get 1 cent on that. I'm
so sorry. Like, what did the publications say?
I think they reported something like 30 million rand, which really it was divided by 30 or 28. It was not as much. But the funniest was that not only did I not get that money, I had to pay tax on that money that I didn't get.
Wow.
How do you recover from that? You talk about trust, right? And you said that that's such an important part.
Tequila and therapy.
Yeah. Well, to your point around, who do you choose to spend your life with? Janine's been by far the best decision I've ever made. So how do you recover? I think I've been very blessed. I think when you get blessed with the talent from God to do something you love, and no matter what your spiritual inclination is, and when you start forming a way of life and how you lead your life. Janine says I've got a lot of rabbit holes where I sort of plug various money into. But I'm very much of the opinion that the life that rugby's given me is amazing. And And yes, you should invest and prepare for the future and do all these things. And I actually had a really cool thing the other day is that they say you only live once. The thing is, we only die once. We live every day. And I love living every day. And I think not keeping everything to yourself, I'm wasteful with money, but taking mates out, enjoying life, having experiences with my family, having experiences internationally. So I think in giving and in being fruitful with what I've received, there has been an element of I've received tenfold more because of that.
Did having that side make you a better player? Being able to have value away from the game so that you didn't wrap your entire worth up with how you performed on the pitch?
So not in 2010. So in that year where I had to keep everything private because I was like this public limelight, our relationship was like with myself and my dad, who was like the best agent ever. So I had to keep everything private for as long as possible. And I actually had a really good first 6 months in Cape Town where I was one of the top try scorers, was going really well. And then when we got into Springbok camp, I didn't realize that first I wasn't talking about it to anyone. So I was keeping everything contained. And that probably started eating at me a little bit. And I think the harder that I tried on the field to put it aside, the bigger the impact it had actually on my gameplay, which was pretty tough. And one of my lowest points, and there was quite a few years in my rugby career, but one of my lowest points was 2010 playing against Australia in Bloemfontein. And I'd had a bad run with the Springboks. Not as a collective, we were having a bad run, but individually, I was also not playing the best. And I'd gone to Peter de Villiers, our head coach, that week, and I said, Coach, I think I need just a little break. I need to get my head clear. And he started laughing at me. He's like, what? I was like, no. But you're not hearing me. I think I just need to just distance myself. There's a lot going on in my personal life. He's like, no. But Coach, he says, well, you need to understand that it's going to be a lot easier for me to select you in the starting 15 and replace you before halftime if you're playing badly than what it's going to be for me to justify dropping you and trying to reselect you again. I was like, oh wow, this guy's wisdom is profound, which I didn't at that time understand. And then he then selected me in the starting 15, and I then proceeded to have a very crap game against Australia where I did get taken off before halftime and got booed by 43,000 South Africans in Bloemfontein. And I was like, I just want the world to open up right below my feet, swallow me whole, spit me out, and maybe at some point. But if Peter de Villiers had not made that decision at that point to select me, at that stage I'd probably just played, let's call it 60-odd games for the Springboks. I would have never played 100 test matches for South Africa. And again, that's why I say, who's the best coach I ever played under? It's the one that selected me. And all the personal elements that you had to go through, but then having someone like Janine by my side who not only knew my story, was not someone that sort of came in late and was the best decision of my life, was pretty impactful in the journey that we had together to be able to come out the other side. And that's where resilience and perseverance comes into play, because not everyone knows your story. Not everyone knows the challenges. And as an individual, resilience isn't something that immediately happens. It's not like, you guys are resilient now. And go, how did I get to this point of resilience? It's about, and a lot of times when teams become successful, there was a point of resilience and character building that they need. And if we could go back to the 2011 to 2015 All Black rugby team, getting knocked out in the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup in 2007 was their point of inflection. This current Springbok team, 2017, was the lowest South African rugby had ever been. They lost 52-3 against the All Blacks, or 57-0 against the All Blacks in Palmerston North, right? 2007. Rassie Rasmus came in, changed the dynamics, but they all got to experience that low. And I think as individuals, we really have our own points of resilience building. And no one can define your personal resilience building journey but yourself, because no one understands mentally how you felt. No one understands physically how you felt, where you actually didn't want to get out of bed in the morning and you didn't want to face the world. No one understands that. So as an individual, resilience isn't something that immediately happens. It's built over a course of time. And I think with resilience comes perseverance, because in those moments of character building, you can choose defeat, or you can choose to try and not be defeated.
you said there about kind of being booed off, and you said that earlier.
Yeah.
In context to the advice your father said about don't let them steal your joy.
Yeah.
And what I hear is interesting because it's like a piece of advice that your father gave you that carried throughout your career.
Yeah.
With the idea that also your father's someone you haven't had the relationship with for 15 years. And the idea that you choose life every day.
Yeah.
Do you not want that relationship with your father again?
So I would easily choose it if he was willing to meet halfway. And I think the fact that when I approached and I gave an opportunity for truth wasn't spoken. And I think in safeguarding yourself, because for me now, my most important thing is my tribe. So Janine, Timothy, and Gabriel are my most important. And when you get married, and I think that's maybe also where a lot of people struggle, not becoming biblical in any way, but like the Bible actually says you got to leave your mother and your father and take care of yours. So when I got married, like that relationship, yes, I would love to have it. Myself and my mom, unfortunately, also have a weathered relationship. I see her often, but she also chose things knowingly of what was happening. So I'm like, okay, well, my circle, my tribe is my most important. Do I still love my mom? Yes. Would I still love a relationship with my dad? Possibly. But my tribe is my most important thing now. And that's what I need to protect. I need to nurture. I need to make sure that they're sustainable. So would I love it? Yes. Would it be amazing? But also I gave him an opportunity. And so that's also where trust becomes really important, right? So like bump your head once, yes, it's a mistake. Bump your head twice, it's your fault. So again, my tribe is my most important, and how I nurture, protect, potentially create generational wealth is not for what's happened before me. It's for what's to come, which is becoming important. And again, at that point, I could let the disdain of the poor relationship that I have with my dad impact me, or I can choose to make a great life for my kids. And I'm going to choose the latter because that gives me energy. If I have to constantly worry about something that's not going to do it, it doesn't make sense.
Did you feel the weight of paying for so many people? I often see this with athletes where there's the star of the family and the money trickles down and you've got a lot of mouths to feed, whether it's mum, dad, Janine, kids, agent.
What did Patrice ever say? 102 people call him Santa.
Oh, wow. No, so that's actually funny. Because in South Africa, there is a thing called black tax. And it's funny. It's like someone like Sia Khaleesi. They literally, it's the weirdest phenomenon. And I've never had to experience it, where the players of African descent, so black Africans in South Africa, like when they go back to their villages or the town, there's this thing called Ubuntu. So like we are, like you are because we are. So they actually go back and they have to like physically give cash to their community because the community raised them. So they now need to assist the community. It's like the weirdest dynamic. So I'm in a very fortunate position that I've never had to do that. And my upbringing, I'm very grateful for, because at that sort of end part of apartheid, late 80s, early 90s, as a person of color in South Africa, I was given incredible opportunities. I went to the best schools. My dad, was forging his way in the corporate space and was doing really well from a business perspective. So I went to great schools. I went to like some of the best universities, and I correlate my journey where at 16, 17 years old, I was worrying about what pair of boots my dad's going to buy me, right? Makazole Mapimpi, who becomes the first ever South African to score a try in a World Cup final, for 5 years of his life had to walk 10 kilometers to school in the morning, 2 hours, 10 kilometers back home in the evening. So 4 hours of his day was spent walking just to a place of education where he would get out of his immediate situations. And he became the first Springbok rugby player to score a try in a World Cup final. I was 17 in matric. You can get your learner's license. I was worrying about what car my parents were going to get me in matric. Not that I got a car, unfortunately, because I didn't have a learner's license. But I wasn't worrying about the basic living. And to your point, so I've been brought up in an environment where my brother's become very successful. He's over in Qatar. My sister was maybe under that umbrella with my mom and my dad, so she's maybe not quite successful, but I haven't had to look after family. So yes, you help out, you do things, but I've been very fortunate that I haven't done like Patrice ever had. He called 120 by 120 people to Santa.
What about looking at South Africa broadly then, and where you were at your peak. So 2007 World Cup win. You then had 2011, 2015.
We lost to Japan, Brighton.
At that moment, I mean, people were saying, Leicester win the Premier League, South Africa lose to Japan. I mean, what's more extraordinary?
Yeah. No, Japan beat South Africa.
But yeah.
Bonkers. The miracle of Brighton. It was exactly like that.
The nation must have been ashamed.
But what, like, you look at the continuity now, because then you mentioned just there, right? You hit your bottom point, and then Rassie Erasmus comes in, and you've won back-to-back World Cups, and there's been a story around it, and the brand of the Springbok just seems more powerful than ever. But what happened after that World Cup that meant it didn't continue?
So the one thing that we are seeing now that's actually never happened before in South African rugby history is continuity. So in 2015, Heineke Meyer was the coach, and the weirdest thing about South African rugby is that Kitch Christie won the World Cup in 95. Immediately, a new person gets put into the position. So there's no continuity, brings in all new things. And what then happened is every 4-year cycle, there was a change. So Jake White wins the World Cup in 07. Yes, admittedly, a year before the World Cup, he lost 49-0 in Australia against Brisbane, in Brisbane against Australia. But he was a World Cup winning coach and wasn't given the opportunity to continue, which is weird, right? Like, you look at now, it's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? So I think there was no continuity, and it was this mindset that, okay, well, every 4-year cycle we have a new coach, which when Erasmus came in, there was total alignment with everything. So 2016, Alistair Coetzee had come in. There was an alignment, from top level down. There was too many voices. There was sort of this thing, do we choose overseas-based players? Don't we choose overseas-based players? And it was just an absolute shambles, but there was no alignment. So Alistair Coetzee himself actually wasn't given the best opportunity to succeed. He got given a logistical plan in 2016. He got named officially as coach in May 2016. He got sort of told to the world. June 2016 was his first tenure. Like, he had Ireland coming to South Africa in 2016. South Africa lost to Ireland for the very first time in 2016, but it's like, he only had a month to prepare a team that he hadn't had at all. Had to choose a captain randomly. Adrian Strauss, to his credit, stepped up to the plate incredibly well in what was a loss of legends. So Victor Matfield, Fourie du Preez, Skalkberger, the Duplessis brothers, like, there was this huge change of guard. And now with Heineke Meyer now leaving, you didn't have continuity from a player perspective. So it was the likes of myself and Adrian, a few youngsters like Sia, Eben Etzebeth, Louis de Jager, Damon Lenley. So there wasn't like this, okay, well, let's just continue the momentum of what happened in 2008 when Peter de Villiers had come in with a very strong group of World Cup winners. All of a sudden, we'd lost to Japan. Yes, we ended third at that World Cup, but there was this lack of alignment where I think we've had Rassie Erasmus, who was involved in the SA Rugby structures since about 2007 in some way or form. But immediate continuity, immediate alignment. Rassie put some firm boundaries in place. I think his coaching style is very autocratic and very firm in various ways, and it's not sort of shape up or shift out. He sort of puts certain things in place, and it actually allows players to take accountability and responsibility, not get spoon-fed. But there's been continuity. So it's the first time ever over a 3 World Cup cycle that we've had a singular person sort of overseeing the whole running, which has never happened before. That being said, to a point of resilience, Eben Etzebeth was captain when South Africa lost 57-0 in Palmerston North. And the hurt, the resilience, the character building of that journey of this team, and what Rassie's done phenomenally well over the course of the 2018, so let's call it the last 7 years of being involved in the structures, he's allowed to constantly bring players in to learn from the experience. So Eben Etzebeth, the most capped Springbok ever on 138 test matches or whatever it is now. Sia Khaleesi's just become a test centurion. You had Willie Leroux, Andre Pollard, Peter Steph du Toit, double World Rugby Player of the Year, Damon Dalendi, Jesse Kriel, all on 70, 80, 90, 100 test matches. But then he sort of blood in this new group of players. So Sasha Feinberg and Gumazulu, and he's got the really great alignment from the top structure down all the way down to junior level rugby in South Africa, without even be university level rugby. So alignment's been a very key factor. Support of that alignment from the corporate structure, so SA Rugby, has been incredibly key. And Rusty's been allowed to, as probably one of the most incredible rugby brains, the most innovative, the most out-the-box thinking ever that the game's ever seen. Probably the most loudest, very much like Harry, where doesn't hold his tongue in any way or form. But he's been able to say, this is what I believe needs to be done for success to be achieved. We need more sponsors, we need more funds, we need X, Y, Z, we need the structures being put up from the ground level up. And it's been alignment.
When we talked before, and we were looking at 2019 success, and we were saying everything, well, and we were saying this about border rugby as well, but the sport being so verticalized, not necessarily embracing everything outside of it. And you went straight to the fact that success, what happened in 2019, was the perfect opportunity to tell the most incredible story. And yet it didn't happen. It was kept. It was put under lock and key in a specific region.
2019 Supersport, along with SA Rugby, created this. But what the drive to survive was for Formula One, or for reality sports back in those days. Like Chasing the Sun is probably one of the most emotionally phenomenal pieces of documentary series you'll ever watch. And particularly from South Africa, maybe even more so. But then they geo-locked it to South Africa. It was like, guys, this is a phenomenal story, in my opinion. So 1995, I got inspired to play the game. So watershed moment in my life. 2007, winning a World Cup, IRB Player of the Year, pinnacle of my career. That's the best, right? 2019 was by far the best moment and showcase of South African rugby. Reason being, you had Siya Kolisi, first black African to captain, win a World Cup. Makazole Mapimpi, who literally was the most least likely player to not only ever play for the Springboks, but to score a try in a World Cup final for the very first time as a Springbok. Cheson Colby, who could have easily, growing up in really volatile circumstances in Cape Town or the Western Cape, gone into gangsterism, becomes the second person to score a try. And the reason I say it was by far our finest moment, because all of a sudden you had a team in a sport which for 80% of the country pre-1994, 95, was seen as an oppressionistic one, because it was only a certain group of people that was a minority that could play the sport. All of a sudden, you got a group of players that speak to the whole country, to every demographic of the country, where true hope of someone like Siya Kolisi, who when I was winning the World Cup in 2007, was watching that in a Shebeen in Zwede, or somewhere in Port Elizabeth or the Eastern Cape. A Shebeen is a sort of local bar, really rough bar in the townships or underprivileged areas in South Africa, because his grandmother, who was living with, couldn't afford satellite television, and his father, who was potentially a little bit of an alcoholic, wasn't cared about him. So he was watching it in this really rough. So, that's 2007. And all of a sudden, 2019, you had true symbolism of hope, true symbolism of what can be achieved if everyone cuts the bullshit, works towards a common goal, contributes, not putting themselves or their ego above the team, and working towards success. And Rassie Erasmus was instrumental in sort of putting that framework of success and what needed to be put in place to be achieved, but that every contributing factor, individuals as players, management as their roles and responsibilities, led towards that 2019 victory. And that's why I say it was by far our finest moment, because you had this team that spoke to the whole of South Africa. Myself and JP Peterson in 2007 were the only players of colour on the field. 1995, Chester Williams was the only person of colour in the squad, let alone on the field. So 2019, and that has led to these players understanding their responsibility that far outweighs the pitch on which they play the game, far outweighs the lines in which their sport gets transcended. And they become a true symbol of hope, a true symbol of what can be achieved. And yes, it potentially is at times fleeting moments, because sport doesn't change the GDP of a country, unfortunately. Siya, lifting the World Cup trophy doesn't mean automatic influx of investment, from a global financial perspective. But it does make people feel better. And on a Monday morning, South Africa feels better because of sport. And we've been exceptionally lucky. We've had Dricus du Plessis, our athletes are led by Carney Sabini this year, our women in the World Cup with Laura Wolford at cricket. It's been phenomenal. Our women in the women's Rugby World Cup in 2025. So sports really played And I say to people, if England had won in 2019, which many people believe they should have, given how tremendously they thumped New Zealand in that, probably one of the best World Cup performances I've ever seen in 2019 in that semi-final in Japan. They play the final. Another quick stat for you that would hopefully get people thinking you're phenomenal is that since the game's become professional in 1996, no team has ever beaten New Zealand in the knockouts and go on to win the next game. So 99, France beat New Zealand in the semi-final, lost to Australia in the final. 2003, Australia beat New Zealand in the semi-final, lost to England in the final. 2007, France beat New Zealand in the quarterfinal, lost to Argentina. 2011, 2015, New Zealand obviously went unbeaten. 2019, England beat them in the semi-final and then ended up losing.
But sorry, and
they played their final.
If England had won that,
if England had won that, they would have come back. There would have been a ticket tape parade, and it would have been done. Siya Kolisi and the team take that trophy back to South Africa, and all of a sudden, kids in townships in South Africa see not hope anymore. Kids, like when I was they don't see hope. They don't see inspiration. They see potential reality. And it transcends just winning. It creates potentially generational differentiation in ideology, because there's now something tangibly real that has come out of their circumstances and achieved success.
So for something as powerful as this, why have we got a game on the business side financially that struggles so much? And I completely get you can't look at this globally because it means so different things in different regions. But if we look at it holistically, I don't think it's a big secret or blasphemy to say that there is a problem financially with the game. So with all of this amazing influence that it has far beyond the pitch, what needs to happen to put it in the position to thrive as a business?
So I think to thrive as a business, I think the legacy infrastructure of rugby needs to think differently. And when I say legacy structure, rugby, for me, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, rugby is a global sport in a way, is that it's played in quite a few countries. But rugby is the only global sport where the global calendar doesn't start and stop at the same time. And everything, because we have this ideology that rugby is a winter sport, rugby must remain a winter sport, but unfortunately winter in the southern and northern hemisphere are at different times. So we're now stuck in this thing that rugby is a winter sport because that's how it always was. And I'm like, okay, well, if we really want to be progressive in the game, and World Rugby has been trying, to their credit for a long time to get a global calendar. But you can't have a global calendar if you don't start and stop at the same time. So the fact that the Tri-Nations or the Rugby Championship now is played at a different time to the Six Nations, you can't create an international window because at some point your international players are playing international rugby at different times of the year. South African teams have now left Super Rugby and are playing and plying their trade in Europe with the URC and Champion and Challenge Cup, which has maybe watered down that competition a little bit. If we want to be competitive to other global sports that are much easier to understand, because let's be honest, rugby is, if you watch it for the very first time, it is a phenomenally complex sport. Like you look at a ruck and you're like, okay, but why? And then the scrum and you're like, okay, but why? We've got this very complex sport where it's not legacy driven and we don't have an American fan base of 250 million people of which to pull from, right? So when the game is so complex and a referee can make 6 or 7 decisions at any point at a ruck, but now you're sitting in the freezing cold at Allianz Twickenham on the 15th of November, I don't want to take my kids to watch rugby like that. Can you imagine, right? Just give me your thoughts. Can you imagine going down to Cape Town at this time of year and experiencing 30-degree heat? Can you imagine, and the July-June window, and I know there's Wimbledon and all the others, but can you imagine watching rugby in June in the Northern Hemisphere? Sunshine, the experiential opportunity on a concourse around a stadium, the kids loving it, you go in shorts. We stuck in this archaic legacy ideology that I think we need to change, and that requires buy-in from a whole group of stakeholders, whether it not just be World Rugby, whether it be the federations and the unions. If we look at what Live Golf has done for golf, it's difficult to have positive disruption. So R360, that's wanting to come in and do things differently. They want to positively disrupt for the right reasons. I don't quite know the mechanics of how it all works, but where do you fit it in now? Because the rugby is all year round. There's no break. There's no start to stop. IPL came in, let's do the IPL of rugby. I'm like, India has 1.1 billion people, 1.2 billion people. Rugby doesn't have 1.2 billion people that it can pull on. So how are we not losing the avid rugby fans? And how are we making the game easier for those that look at the game and think, this is, firstly, it's physically abrasive, but it's also so difficult to understand. How are we making it easier for them? And a great example would be Ilona Maher at the Paris Olympics, right? She worked incredibly hard at a certain segment of her brand. And yes, it's a bit of an anomaly, but she struck such a phenomenal chord and it's become rugby's most followed player, right? Most followed player, ever. 5.9 million people on Instagram follow her because of a brand she's created. And rugby's always been sort of stuck on, we're a team. Individualism is not always, it's potentially more frowned upon than what it is celebrated. So there's a lot of things. I don't think so. I don't think it's just one thing that needs to happen. I think the most important thing that needs to happen is we need to get alignment in the calendar.
Siya Khaleesi, for the impact that he has, and it's not all about followers, but having 1.5 million Instagram followers is crazy. And David Warner, I just saw it the other day, right? The Australian cricketer, as with so many of them, he has 10 million Instagram followers, and you're talking about the person at the top of rugby being 5 million. If you were playing today and you had that brand, you're one of the very few players that had a brand. That's like Harry said, that went outside of the sport. Racing the cheetah, doing things like this.
Being on a Gillette advert.
But being on a Gillette advert, exactly.
But people knew Bryan Habana if you didn't watch rugby.
And that was, and that's the point, right? So if you're one of the very few people that's had that.
Very kind of you.
Thank you. But if you were applying that now, isn't that what we need more of?
Do you know what I would love? Joe aside, you look at the protein munching guys and the gym craze and the Gymshark community. I would fucking love to see inside Bryan Habana's training and workout routines. It would open up a mega audience.
Yeah, you're not going to see much at the minute. I've been horrible.
Really?
I have been horrible. So that's, again, discipline in the post. I've been absolutely horrible. So please don't say I'm trying to think who currently, a Benjamin Kaiser or someone that's actually training at the minute.
No, that's just paddle.
Or paddle. Or it's some form of training. I've been horrible.
Eben Etzebeth.
I mean, 100%.
6 foot, what is he, 6'9"?
Is it difficult to stay fit when you're no longer a pro?
So you talk about sort of moments of despair, right? Making my announcement in 2018 of retiring. And obviously, given the rise of social media, I've got to do this nice, little post, thought endearing, lovely little post on Instagram. And I sort of did this post in the south of France, and getting a barrage of acknowledgement and thanks and whatever. And I'm like, a lot of you people absolutely swore at me or booed me off the stadium in 2010. But yes, I'll take the acknowledgement. And I walked through the door in the south of France at our place in Toulon. And the house we were renting, the upstairs was sort of where you came in, but the living area was downstairs. So you sort of had to open the door, walk down the stairs. Janine was 7 months pregnant with our second, Gabriel, and Timmy was 3 years old. And as I opened the door, and I made the social media post, my phone had blown up, just media houses calling, everyone wanting to have a piece of me. As I opened the door, I burst out crying. I just, all that emotion just came out. I was sobbing uncontrollably, and the reason was, as I opened that door, it was almost this analogy of, I'm leaving this, and this was all I'd ever known for 15 years, 16 years, 17 years. And it was emotionally distraught because I didn't know what was on the other side of the door. And this was just a correlation between rugby and not. I didn't know what was on the other side. And I sobbed. And then in that moment of total isolation, being at a low because of what had just happened, of announcing my retirement, I hear Timothy 3 years old, having this phenomenal belly laugh about something Janine was doing downstairs. And I was like, in this moment of uncontrollable solace for myself, I was like, there's so much more to life than what rugby had given me. Like, and I didn't plan it. I didn't know why he laughed, but it was like just this phenomenal analogy of, okay, I'm leaving that behind, and I'm like in this total despair, in emotional destruction. But I'm like, there's more to live for, and there's more that I need to do to provide for this that's so important to me. And that was sort of, rugby had given me a lot, but there was just so much more. And I sort of went down, and it was just like this embrace, and like we all had a bit of a cry and emotional. But it was that real correlation of being able to understand that life was great. So the important again is Janine then said to me, because she studied BSc sports science, and she sort of looked at me, she goes like, has anyone given you a detraining program? It's like, sorry, what gibberish are you talking? It's like, well, your body has been at this physical prowess and peak performance for 15, 16 years and become accustomed to a certain way of training. So your body's used to that. Has anyone sort of put you through a process of you're no longer going to be paid to train every day of your life, and life can happen outside, but your job is paying you to physically be active? Has anyone given you a process of detraining? I was like, well, that's a ridiculous truth bomb that you've just dropped on me. Like, no one's given me a detraining program. And literally I went like from that, and I'm still genetically a little bit forward, but I literally went from that to zero. My knees were screwed. Like, I couldn't run. I've become a little bit lazy. I'm not getting paid to train anymore. Why would I want to train if I'm not getting paid to do it, right? Like, why would you want to do it? And there's no one gives you a form of detraining. Like, there's no, okay, listen, we're going to wind you down. So you're now retiring. Here's a program for the next 6 to 12 months where you unfortunately need to unwind how you were wound up. I don't know if there's anything like that, because you jump off the cliff financially, physically, mentally. And various federations, players' unions, organizations try equip you with skill sets, but there's no book to say, okay, this is how you're going to feel. You're going to feel alone. You're going to feel like you're not going to be skill set enough to be able to do X, Y, Z. You're not going to be earning the same salary. Like, your income's going to always not outweigh your expenses because you've become used to this way of life. So there's this transition period that everyone talks about that is difficult for all professional athletes. And I think there's a stat in the US where, like, in 2014 they did, where I think there's something like 70% of NFL players 4 to 5 years out from retiring are either in jail, bankrupt, or have committed suicide. It's like a ridiculous stat, right? Like, I don't know, my numbers could be a little bit wrong, but there's this sort of immediate transition that it's very difficult to unlearn everything that you've learned. So your body doesn't unlearn. So have I been poor training-wise in the last 7 years? 100%.
You said about kind of the cliffs that you fall off, be it physically or be it financially. This is incredibly rude and direct. Do you need to work? In my head, I'm just like, you make bank for 10 years. You sign Adidas, you sign Canterbury, you sign every Gillette.
Yeah.
Fuck, you guys make hay while the sun shines, quite rightly so. So you don't have to work from 35 on.
But you do, because no matter what amount of money, so there's two things. So if you don't know how money works, you're not going to know how to work with money, right? So if you haven't put things in place that adequately either lets you live off interest or invested in property or done something that brings in money, you're just then going to be eating into your money at every point.
100%.
And unfortunately, the correlation of the life you live as a professional athlete and the standards you potentially set when no money is coming in,
don't match it.
There's a constant mismatch. So one of the big things to that point, so I got back to South Africa in 2018. Jean de Villiers had been working with Citadel Investments based out of South Africa. He was the head of philanthropy. And he's like, Brian, listen, you got to come speak to the team. I'm like, John, I'm fine. I've like put money away. Yeah, I got this. But I had zero income. I had zero income. I didn't have like, he goes, no, I'm like, John, I'm fine. Being the good mate he is, like, listen, I just really feel you need to come speak to the guys. Just like free of fees. Just come have a chat. No obligation. Like, just come have a chat. Okay, cool. So myself and Janine go sit with Abe, and Abe's like, okay, well, give me your budget, give me your expenses, give me your income, assets, liabilities, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, cool. All right, cool. What are you currently doing? I'm like, oh, I've got an ambassadorial contract with MasterCard, doing some HSBC work, doing a bit of punditry at the Rugby World Cup. So this is what the figures are like. Like, okay, cool. He says, listen, I'm just going to sort of crunch the numbers, put it in our system. Can we set up another meeting in 2 weeks? Like, okay, cool. Myself and Janine come back 2 weeks later. Abe says, okay, please sit down. Okay, cool. This is the system. This is how it works. He says to me, okay, so if you don't work another day in your life, and what you've told me in terms of how you want to live your life and the expenses, you want to have 2 international trips a year, you want to fly business class, you want to have local holidays, you want to send your kids to private school, you want to buy a Range Rover or Land Rover Defender for yourself and your wife, you want to have a house of that value, paying off these costs, you want to have a holiday home. If you do not work another day in your life, your savings are going to be depleted in 3.5 years, and you're going to have to sell the house you're currently living in. Sorry, what? Come again? Just repeat that last 30 seconds?
It's fucking nuts.
But it's the truth, right? Because
okay, so in my head, I'm like, you guys, again, this is maybe where we're so off.
Yeah.
But I'm like, in the peak, you should be doing 5 to 7 a year.
Pounds? No chance. Not as rugby player.
Seriously?
So Anton Dupont or someone like maybe Bowden Barrett. So, and again, it's figures always, but the biggest contract currently in rugby, purely contractually, right? Purely contractually, is probably about anywhere between, I'd say at most, between 1 and 1.5 million pounds a year.
Totally get that. But
a year, right? And there's maybe some marketing sponsorship stuff that brings in another, at most, right? If you live in the UK, that's 50% off, right? So put a tax. So you're only getting between 750 and a million. If you have a house to pay off, right, and you're paying, and you have a car, you have all these other expenses, I hear you, and it sounds logical enough. And I thought exactly the same thing.
No, I'm not thinking of. I don't like respectfully. I don't care about the actual playing contract. I'm thinking about you chasing cheetahs on Gillette.
There was no money in that.
On Gillette billboards, or working with Adidas, working with Canterbury.
So I think my Gillette contract, and back in 2000, and again, I didn't get into that money, and I paid tax on the money I didn't get. But my Gillette contract was maybe, in today's current exchange value, maybe between 50 and 60,000 pounds.
Are you serious?
And it was a 1 year deal.
But Henri, Woods, and Federer would have earned a lot more from that.
Oh, so ridiculous.
You know, it's not. But that's almost the point. Your shock is rugby. Exactly, right? So that's the point of the industry you're playing in. And even then, you being one of those few people, you know, and I genuinely, like, if we're looking at it without John Olomu, you could say Johnny Wilkinson.
100% Johnny.
You.
Oh, no. There's a few. I'd go Brian O'Driscoll, Dan Carter, Richie McCaw.
I was going to say Dan Carter. Brian O'Driscoll, I wouldn't say outside of rugby. I'm talking like on an athlete level.
Yeah.
Would Brian O'Driscoll be on that advert with Henri, Federer and Woods? My opinion, but I'd say no.
That's very cool. I think he would have. So it was sort of, I hear you, but I don't know.
It's awkward for you because you're never going to go, yeah.
No. I think he would. So again, I don't want to say I idolized Brian O'Driscoll, but I looked up to him because I actually played 13, and I had to do a synopsis on Brian O'Driscoll because when I moved from scrum half to 13, I chose Brian O'Driscoll as the player that I want to base, being a centre off of back in 2003, or 2002. And I love Bod. I think he's a phenomenal player. I think he's extremely articulate. But so maybe there is 10 to 15 players, right, give or take, that could have potentially. But the rest it's tough. It's not football, right? We don't earn what the footballers like. As much as I'd love to, rugby, it's a phenomenal sport, and it's a global sport. And in my opinion, and this is brutally honest, I truly believe rugby is the best sport in the world. The reason being, it's the only sport that's for everyone. When I say that, you need to be a certain genetic type to play football, to play golf, to be like this rugby, whether you're short or tall, whether you're slim or gravitationally challenged. Wait, what? I'm judging by your legs, your calves, right? Whether you're male, female, Like when we were in Japan in 2019, there was a guy that was like, and he obviously wasn't full on rugby, but I think he was like 88 years old still playing rugby. Right? Like there's no sport like it in the world where all shapes and sizes can play on a team. Like your props, your locks, your hookers, your flanks are playing with your Ches and Colbys, your Anton Duponts. Give me a sport. Maybe NFL to a point. I just think the values of rugby are a lot better in terms of the respect, the culture, the camaraderie. I honestly think rugby is the best sport in the world because it is for everyone. And we've seen a phenomenal Women's Rugby World Cup happening now in the UK, this year. But it's not at the same financial level as any other sport globally.
So let's say then if we look at how we achieve that, one of those you can say investment into the sport, bring more money in, get more external involvement. We've had private equity. We had Sean Fitzpatrick in here and we've joked a couple of times and he was talking about Silver Lake valuing the All Blacks based on the fact they thought they had 1 billion fans. Right.
I did challenge him on that.
No, you did. No, and to be fair to Sean, it wasn't Sean saying it. That was what Silver Lake used to value that deal.
Yeah.
We had the piece in South Africa with private equity looking to buy part of the commercial arm.
Yeah.
From how you speak today and how you look at the whole thing, have you been asked, would you get involved at a level to be able to bring some of that value into the sport now, to be able to give some of that broader opportunity to the players through a bit of that capital injection that can elevate a sport to the next level?
I think given rugby's global differentiation in terms of supporters, followers, and yes, World Cups are amazing and the number of followers, and we had records now with the Women's World Cup. The tournament in France in 2023 was also great. So it's growing every year. I probably really see rugby very much as a personal investment sport, purely because of a much smaller, reduced fan base. So evaluation is always really tricky because if you say, let's say the All Blacks have 1 billion supporters, how do you correlate that to equity or financial capital? Like, do every one of those billion need to buy an All Black jersey for the All Black brand to be successful and bring in profit? So valuations are really tricky, and I'm not clever enough in that scope to understand how to value. And I do believe injection of capital into rugby from a framework of business that is not in rugby is really important. So having people that think about rugby as a business rather than think about rugby as a sport, because there's potential equity valuation in how you align a sport, how do you create competition value, and how do you potentially take a market of rugby to India, where rugby is not a big, but there was an Sevens IPL in India in June this year because they believe there's opportunity. There's a lot of money in India.
How did that go?
I don't know.
Wonder how that went. Mumbai, meet rugby. Okay.
I think it was all right. I think as a first trial, I don't think it went too bad. I mean, HSBC got on board, and they've grown the sport for it to become an Olympic one in 2016. The 7 Series is probably the most enjoyable one for an early rugby adopter because it's really cool. It's fun. You get 18 different nationalities in a stadium. You've got from the Kenyans to the Samoans to the Fijians to the South Africans to
faster.
It's faster. It's exciting. It's short paced. It's less time consuming in terms of the actual product than 80 minutes of trying to watch a game that's really difficult to understand at points. But I believe as important as capital and financial injection is in the game, I think we need a different level of intellectual investment into the game to have the game be managed and done properly. Because what worked for rugby 25, 20, 15 years ago in a world that is moving at such a rapid pace technologically, how content is viewed, everything is it's so different to where we were. Like, again, when I was winning a World Cup, I joke, we had emails and faxes being plastered on the wall in the team room in France because there was zero social media, right? So I think the capital injection is important, and rugby needs a model of sustainability when it comes to that. You have a Rugby World Cup every 4 years where the influx of income then needs to run the game globally at all levels for 4 years. That model is really, really tough. In the UK, behind paywalls or pay gates, on broadcasts, you you have an ITV that is great, and as BBC that's great, that gives it out to everyone as a sort of free-to-air platform. But for the rest, it's really difficult to grasp a community that's very small, that doesn't want, Netflix. What does it cost in the UK? What does Netflix cost in the UK?
£10.99 now a month. Yeah.
£10.99 a month.
Yeah, it's gone up.
And Supersport, Sky Sports. What does Sky Sports cost?
Sky and
As a
TNT
package?
together, like 80, 90, 70,
So
80 quid.
you almost are like differentiating a market. So if TNT is your broadcaster and the general public is only getting to see rugby on a Six Nations, or you're almost democratizing the ability to showcase the game to a bigger audience if it's only happening once a year, at a rugby World Cup or at a Six Nations or the like. So I don't have all the facts. I do think having expertise of other thought or trains of thought in comparison to what we've had over the last 25, 30 years is incredibly important. And because rugby is such a difficult product to understand, how do we make the game simpler? How do we speak to a market that is maybe younger, where parents are worried about concussion, head impact, and all these things, right? Rugby is a contact sport, and do we embrace the fact that it is a contact sport, or do we shy away from it? Because we can either fundamentally shy away from the fact that it is a contact sport, and when you choose it, you understand the risks that come with it, and yes, the sport needs to be made safe. Or do we? I look at the battles that rugby has currently with it being this competitive physical sport. Yet the growth of UFC over the last 10 years has skyrocketed. And the jobs of those UFC athletes are to physically almost kill each other. Right? And yet the growth rates of that, and we're too scared to embrace rugby being this physical combative sport. Yet the UFC uses it. People come out blooded, and the more blood we see in UFC, the happier we are.
What did the UFC lead with? They led with marketing. Right?
Yeah.
So they addressed an issue from the off, and they made a product out of it that then took away all of that critique that could be leveled at it. And rugby, but look, it's more historical, so it's playing with a different set of
beast.
things, but it's such a different game for them to play. They need to embrace it after the sport's been.
I agree with you. And again, if you don't have this global perspective, right? Okay, let's do it like this. Let's change things up. Let's first get our base re-excited about and reinvigorated about the sport, because the current everyone's what rules are happening this year? And then because you don't have a global calendar, some of the teams and some of the nations have to start playing new rules halfway through the season. You're but they've been playing like this for 4 months, now they've got to play like that. So how do we make the game simpler, more understandable? How do we potentially give the power of the game to the referee? And so we've got potentially two choices to make. Rugby can become like NFL, where we try make sure that every decision on the field is correct, and becomes a 3-hour spectacle, which not many rugby supporters are going to want. So either we become perfectly technical, or as supporters, we then going to need to suck up that sometimes the referees maybe aren't going to get everything right, but hopefully they brought up in a system where they're given the skill set to be able to make 90% of the calls correct 90% of the time. And if there's the odd year there, VAR, if you think about football or soccer, VAR is still not perfect. And what? It's really just a line. It can't be that difficult. It really can't in football, right? There's not much more that you can. There's a certain framework. There's maybe 4 things that you look at. Did it cross the line? Did not cross the line? Was there VAR? And they're not even getting VAR in football or soccer, right? So how are we going to get TMO stuff in right where disparity? So
draw the line in the wrong place.
Yeah, draw the line in the wrong place potentially. I do think expertise in a different skill set. I do believe rugby is very much a personal investment sport, and most global sports are personal investment, where ROIs aren't really a tangible, physical. I put 10 million rand in, I'm getting 15 million, 10 million pounds in, I'm getting 15 million, 20 million pounds out. But there is this ideology of how do we bring expertise in a very archaic structure of how we potentially see the sport to make the sport better, to embrace a new environment where attention for eyeballs is at an all-time high. It's at an all-time high, and how is rugby doing things that's catching those eyeballs quickly enough, not in 3 minutes on Instagram or TikTok, in 15 to 20 seconds, creating authenticity in that individual. And Ilona Maher is a classic example. Yes, maybe it's an anomaly, but how do we potentially leverage off some of the things that was done well in that to potentially break the shell of how rugby is seen globally?
I'd love to do a quick fire. I can talk to you
quick
for all
fire.
day. How do you feel, or what do you say to yourself when you're watching the haka?
So the first time, that's very good. I mean, how do you feel? So as a spectator,
fucking terrifying.
Okay. So I think there is an aura about it, which I think is special. I think the game absolutely needs it, and it's a great element of the game. And getting to witness it for the first time back in 2005 was pretty amazing. I'm not gonna lie to you, because we played against New Zealand, and it was the last game of the Tri Nations, and we were both in a position to win the Tri Nations. And they actually did the new haka that day for the first time ever. Tano Marga was leading it. And I mean, Tano, just looking at Tano before he does the haka is like, wow. So as like a 22-year-old who's now witnessing this for the very first time, I'm like, oh my shattered nerves. I am in a gladiatorial space with a group of men that are ripping each other's head off in a war dance that's telling us and challenging us to play rugby today. I was like, but you obviously can't show that emotional fear on screen, right? So you keep it all in. But there was like a piece of me thinking, do I ask someone for some toilet paper right now or afterwards?
So it doesn't like anger you, it doesn't like piss you off.
No,
like, you're so freaking arrogant.
Yes, so there is like when you experience it for the first time, it's like it's this aura that you have to embrace, and it is in a way empowering, and like it was amazing. I think I faced it 17 or 18 times. So I think after like the second or third time, it was like just rest. Okay, get it done so I can go play. 2008-9, I then try to see which player was making the most ridiculous face, and like I was like, I would almost comfort myself in like, you look like an absolute idiot. And most of the times it was Ali Williams, the number 5 lock for the All Blacks, who was a great man, played with me with Toulon, but he would pull this face, and I'm like, firstly, how are you even doing that with a face like yours? And his face didn't look mean. It almost like made me comfortable. And then at different times, I'd maybe look at my opposition number and see what exactly he is doing. I'm like, am I reading him right? Am I not reading him right? But the first time, just with the aura that it comes with, and everyone like tries to approach it differently to try mentally upstage them. England in that 2019 Rugby World Cup semi-final was brilliant. Ireland, when they did the 8 in Chicago, was phenomenal in 2016. So the first time, it's like, it is pretty cool getting to watch it live across from you. As a sporting moment, I'm so grateful that I got to experience that. But it became pretty mundane, and you respected it, firstly, but then you almost just wanted it to be over so that you can go play.
Take us into that dressing room in Brighton in 2015.
It was morbid. It was so morbid. Even thinking about it now, it was so difficult to understand what had just happened. Because we never underestimated, and that's the thing, like, Farid Dupré, who'd been playing at Centauri under Eddie Jones, actually said to us in the week he was injured, getting back to full fitness, and he wasn't playing. And he says, guys, listen, Japan are going to come out for us, and we must not for 1 minute think that we're going to just breeze through this game. And we're like, oh, yeah. But I think like the mental fortitude of a player is you sometimes just let arrogance sort of sort of creep into your mindset. And I look at some of those tries, Adrian Strauss, Luet de Jager, like literally untouched, like scored. And then at last, it just was like we capitulated. Absolutely capitulated that last 15 minutes. And their self-belief started building up. And when they got the scrum with like 2 minutes to go, where if they had kicked for the poles, we would have drawn the game, and they decided to go for the line out, we were like, ooh, what have we done? Yeah. And then they end up scoring that try to beat us. It was
4 minutes overtime?
4 minutes overtime. And they actually kept the ball pretty well for like 2.5 minutes in that last stint. I have not watched that game back. I've obviously seen certain highlights, the try being scored, the the tries that one or two of the tries we scored. But it truly was, I think, the darkest day. And I got booed off, the field in 2010. But as a collective, like we'd been, it was very much like having lost 49-0 to Australia in pre the World Cup in 2006. It's undescribable. Like, there's no emotive words that you can correlate with the feeling that you had that day. And because South Africa is so rugby mad, because it was, in my opinion, you talk about teams winning a Premier League or championships that, Leicester, what are the chances of Leicester winning but Premier League, right? But I say this, I think in my opinion was as great as it was for the sport of rugby, it was as conversely bad for South African rugby. It was like our lowest low. And you honestly just can't describe that feeling, because you've never felt something like that before, and you don't know how to feel about it. You don't know how to describe what got you to that point and how you actually lost that game.
So was it shock? Was it shock?
It was
in the dressing room.
Not only shock. It was like,
was it silence or was it anger?
No, it was absolute embarrassment. Like absolute embarrassment.
And that came out in silence?
Silence, yeah. No. So there wasn't shouting, and I mean, even shouting wouldn't have helped it. Like, obviously we couldn't be happy, and we weren't laughing, but like, we were all just in such a state of shock. The silence was deafening, like it was. And credit to Heineke Meyer, it could have easily unraveled very badly after that. Like, and his words of, we can sit here and let this now define us. We can honestly let this define us, and we can be the worst Springbok team that's ever played in a Rugby World Cup. Or we can choose to stand up, and each one of us has to take, and each one of you has to take accountability, because the management can put things into place, but you then need to be able to. So, it was tough, eh? The silence was resoundingly deafening. Like you didn't want to talk. You actually didn't even want to be. You'd almost hope that you'd rather fallen over and died. Like, it was that bad. It was morbid. Absolutely morbid. It's a shock.
What physical sacrifice does no one know about for professional international rugby players that they should know about?
I think for professional athletes in general, and it's not so much a physical trait, but because it's a part of your physical body, the mental capacity with which athletes have to function, no person has a correlation to. As a athlete that's constantly being shown on TV, or you are constantly under the microscope. Every waking opportunity that you play your sport, you're under the microscope. So when you're sitting in a stadium, you have 43,000 people watching everything you do and judging everything you do. Everything. And then you have an opportunity where if they're watching in their living rooms, they become accustomed to them knowing you because you've physically been a part of their immediate surroundings. So you have no correlation with the ideology of how people think about you, assess you, dissect you. So they've got this perception, and your physical being of mental well-being, because it's your brain. So no one tells me, there's no guidebook on how to be the perfect athlete. Like, what is the perfect athlete, right? Do I need to be happy with everyone? Am I not allowed to be a normal person? Am I not allowed to spend time with my kids? Privacy, you get zero of that. But every person gets to judge you microscopically every time you do it. And you can imagine, like, if we had to put a microscope or a camera on a person's workstation 24/7 and allowed the world to judge them every time, how this will. So you've mentally, and I say your brain's a physical part of your genetic makeup, you've got to work with yourself in a way in which you're emotionally stable. And that's really tough, because there's no guidebook on, okay, well, you're going to be thrust into the limelight, you're going to be under the microscope, you're going to get a report card on a Sunday by a journalist saying that you got a 1 out of 10. A journalist that's never played international rugby, doesn't understand, but then the world is going to see that. So I'm going to go to Harry. Harry's going to read the Times on the Sunday, and he's going, Brian played against England. Brian, you were pretty crap. You got a 1 out of 10. Oh, well, Harry, what gave me a 1 out of 10? Oh, no, well, the journalist, so you must have been really crap, right? Because this person is telling me you're a 1 out of 10. Yeah, but I was under the microscope for 80 minutes. What did you do yesterday? I know, I was boozing with my friends. I was having a couple of drinks. Had a line this morning. I had to be up at 6 o'clock for recovery on a Sunday after losing to Japan. So I say that the one thing that people don't understand is that they form an ideology of you based on you constantly being under the microscope, and they then expect you to be okay and in that ideology. So if I go out into public and I'm with my family and I'm eating dinner, and you come up to me when I've got a fork of food that I'm about to put in my mouth, and you say, hey, can I have a photo? And I say, well, I'm eating. Can you just give me 10 minutes? You then call me rude. And if I call you rude back, I'm being an absolute bastard. So you have this, so your brain becomes this incredibly powerful physical trait that you need to manage incredibly well.
In South Africa, do people respect the privacy a lot or not? Like if you go out for dinner in like centre of town, will you get
at the peak?
Several?
No, so one of my worst experiences as a celebrity or professional athlete, myself and Janine had been going out for just a couple of months. I took her family, her mom, the mom's husband and her brother out to one of the local sort of tourist spots just south of Johannesburg. And they were sort of thrust into this public limelight now. So everywhere, Bryan was so popular. They hadn't come from that, so they didn't understand it in any way or form. And we were staying at a hotel, sort of on a river, and we were all 3 separate rooms. And on the Friday night, I phone a restaurant. I said, hi, listen, it's Bryan Habana here, which was the first mistake. I should never have phoned. I phoned the restaurant and I said, listen, I've got sort of my extended in-law family here. Can you just organize me a quiet spot in the restaurant on the Saturday night? Is this seriously Bryan Habana? I'm like, oh, Bryan, what did you do? You idiot, you just arrived. Yeah, it is. No, listen, sorry, we unfortunately can't do a reservation for you because it's sort of come as you go. So when you get here, we'll sort of sort something out for you. I don't think I should do this. Against my better judgment, we go there on the Saturday night, and they've kept me a table right in the middle of the restaurant. This was sort of at the peak of my popularity. So I'm like, oh my word. And what had happened is I'd had an experience a couple of months prior where Etienne Botha was a guy playing at the Bulls with me, and I'd literally moved in with him. And 2 days later, we'd gone out the evening. He wasn't playing that weekend, and I'd left the sort of bar and club that we were at a little bit early, about 11 o'clock that night. I went back to the house and got a call at 5 o'clock in the morning that Etienne had been in a car accident and died. And it was emotionally that's totally separate discussion. But I wake up in Etienne's house and I'm like, I freeze. But the reason I'm telling that is that at the nightclub the night before, someone had taken a photo, and the photo then got put on the front page of the newspaper, Bryan Habana, Wynand Olivier, and Etienne Botha at Firkins pub. And it just and bar the emotion, it was really emotionally disturbing, a lot of the day. But being in his house, I went cold. But that got plastered. So what I then started doing is when I went to a restaurant, I'd go, okay, listen, let me eat my main meal. And as soon as my dessert comes, because once the first person does it, people just feel inclined to do it the whole time. So what I would do is if someone would come, I'd say, let me just eat my main meal. As soon as I'm done with my main meal, happy, I'll oblige, but let me just eat my main meal. So fast forward, taking Janine and her family out. So we're in the middle of the restaurant, and these 2 little young boys, come while I'm eating my starters. And I was like, okay, guys, listen, can I just eat my mains and you can come? And they were so understanding. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And in hindsight, would it have made a difference? Probably would, because I would have been bothered the whole time. So I'd rather have that framework and sort of eat my starters. And I'm about to put a piece of calamari in my mouth, for my main meal. And I get a tap on the shoulder. And I look at this guy and I'm like, can I help you? He goes, I want to talk to you. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm with my family. I'm about to eat my main meal. He goes, I don't care. So now her family that's never experienced, was the most difficult thing for them to now realize, the stepdad like got up, walked off. The brother, who's had a few emotional things that he was dealing with, also like got up and walked. So it's myself, Janine, and her mother at the table, and this guy absolutely lambastes me in the middle of the restaurant, like at the top of his, like, I don't know who the F you think you are doing this. I'm like, but you have no. I'm like, don't fucking that. Like he's going full on at me. The restaurant owner does absolutely nothing. And that guy's going on, I've got Lance Armstrong's yellow jersey from... I'm like, did you also bother him while he was eating his main meal? And like this goes on for like a minute and a half.
What was he going in?
Yeah, for rugby.
Because I told those two little boys and that I was being extremely arrogant, that I didn't want to sign for them. But he had no context of why. So he like went on this tangent for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, like the whole restaurant. It was the most like ridiculously difficult situation to handle, because I actually wanted to get up and punch this guy in the face. But if I punch him in the face...
What do you do?
Exactly right. So there's this expectation, to your point earlier, like there's expectation of how a professional person a celebrity needs to act. So he had no context of why I did what I did. There was a specific reason, because I didn't want to, because of what happened with Etienne, that I sort of put this front, and it just also made life easier. And people then hopefully, at least, if they saw it being said no once, they at least give me time until after. So and then he like walked like over to his mates, and he was like laughing, and like he was the fucking man now. And like there was the first time I'd been with Janine's family, and that was their first experience of my popularity status. And I didn't know nothing like that had ever happened to me before.
Did you respond?
Again, I respond, I'm the baddie, right? So so first he called me an arrogant prick, which I'm like, okay, I don't know who the hell you think you are, but okay, I am, yes, I am a little bit confident because of my status, so I have no idea who you are. But yeah, and the fact that the restaurant owner did nothing, it was like, and I had to eat the rest of my meal with this situation, and he had no context of why I did what I did. And to your point, it's a lot less now, but it's also like, where does that level of privacy end, right? So I've tried to sort of keep my kids a little bit hidden from the limelight, which is difficult, because there's a different pressure and expectation on them because of who their dad is. I never had that, so I'm also now needing to learn how do I equip my kids with that skill set, having not been brought up in a skill set like that. So there's immediate pressure on them. Oh, they're going to be the next Springbok. I'm like, I only started playing rugby when I was 13, So there is pressure constantly being under the spotlight. There's also no rule book, and at the end of the day, you're always wrong, right? Because there's an expectation that you know me. Like, I should smile at you because I've been in your living room scoring tries, and I smile when I score a try. So why aren't you happy and positive? It must be amazing to be, not have any privacy.
One more
Yes.
from me. We talked about the marketability of athletes, rugby players. If there's one that you'd put your hat on now that you'd love to transcend the boundaries of rugby into broader culture, you think has an amazing opportunity to do that, that's playing right now, who would it be?
You know what I'd love, and he is just playing such incredible, and as a youngster, Sasha Feinberg in Ngomazulu. I think he's already created a brand. So his brother's actually in the UK and is a bit of an influencer already, from my understanding. I think, what's his brother's name? I'll get his brother's name. So they're already like sort of marketable in a very different space. So like socialite, which is incredible. And there's a few clips going around, and I'll try to share it with you at some point, where Sasha, even as I think a 13 or 14-year-old, like did this talk of gratitude to the coaches at the end of their season, at their schoolboy rugby season. And I look at this kid, this 13-year-old, and the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, he is disrupting for the right reasons. I think he's got an incredible amount of confidence. A lot of people sometimes see it as arrogance, but I think he's got an opportunity, if he carries on playing the way he's playing, get to the likes of a Sia Khaleesi, Antoine Dupont. The fact that at 22, 23 years old, he's being sort of potentially aligned with a young Dan Carter, I'm like, geez, that's pretty impressive. But yeah, Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu, definitely from a South African perspective, is...
I love Francois Steyn. Do you remember this guy's kicks? This guy's kicks.
We're talking about current. Francois retired. Francois retired like me. 55-meter drop kicks. Yeah.
He's retired. Oh, that's so upsetting. But at least Jason Robinson's still playing. Yeah, that's it.
Well played, Harry.
Thank you so much. I love these days. Those were the days. That was great.
So just on Johnny Wilkinson, phenomenal rugby player. So Johnny's last ever season of rugby was at Toulon, which was my first season at Toulon. And I mean, I got to play with a few players. He is just on a totally different, like he was 120% committed every day. And I mean, I can't say that about myself because I love to switch off. Johnny never switched off, like never ever. But he was so good. Johnny was so good. We won the double in my first year at Toulon, his last, which was winning Europe, so Champions Cup, as well as the top 14. Johnny became so revered in the south of France that he got the key to the city. But more importantly, as an Englishman, so good that they played God Save the Queen when we beat Cust in the top 14 final at Stade de France in 2014.
Wow.
No Englishman will get that from France.
No, I mean, name one, like zero. At Stade de France, in a French league, God Save the Queen got played, went to Toulon, won the top 14. I mean, you talk about global superstardom. That is achievement. I mean, I never got in courses Sikelele played anywhere at any point. We had Rastu Masani in France in 2009, which was pretty abysmal.
Bryan, this has been such a joy. I can't thank you enough for opening the door for me. It's so kind of you. I can't thank you enough for joining us. This has been incredible. You've been amazing.
Thank you, guys. Business of sport. Well done for what you're doing. Keep on raising the bar. Bring some of those pounds to South Africa. We need it.